another round of Brandy, candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand, with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
And welcome back to another round of Brandy.
Hey, Reilly, I just realized that this is episode number 30.
The big 3-0.
So I think this might call for maybe another round after we've signed off on this episode to celebrate. But I think today we're talking about the topic of desire.
Yeah, we've mentioned it. If you listen to other episodes, we've mentioned it here and there about desire and how it, with brands and them drawing in consumers or the audience and kind of being that magnet and that pull. But today, I think it's definitely diving in and comparing that to supply and demand, and then this, third kind of element of desire and how brands relate to that, how you can start tying that in with your business and kind of start tapping into that power of desire and what that means exactly.
And in relation to demand particularly.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And so kind of kicking it off, let's first define demand, because anyone who has a business, you have supply and demand. That's basic.
The basics of economics, right?
Yeah, and it's just like, and sometimes economics does make things a little too cut and dry, and so there are a lot of assumptions in just even the fact of supply and demand of, okay, if there is demand, then there is supply, but that doesn't mean that just because there's supply that there's going to be demand.
Yeah.
And so when you think about desire on top of that, the difference between desire and demand is that desire is much more of this, it's aspirational, it's wishful, it's emotional. Yeah. And there's kind of like, you may have dreams of something, or even then that dream can then go to that next step of it becoming attainable. And that's really where then you go into demand. And what, if you look up economic definition for demand, it's going to be something that it's affordable, it's attainable, it's much more realistic. It's not so much wishful as much as it's, okay, this is actually a product market fit for this individual who can actually buy the product.
Yeah.
So there's kind of our clear-cut definition for demand. And so then comparing that to desire, really desire is going to be much more of that, like Scott said, like that emotional kind of driving force behind that. And it can also be that magnetic pull of within a market, a brand could be more desirable, and those people will be more drawn to that brand.
Right. For instance, I mean, and I think the easiest example that comes to mind for me is when I think of Apple and what it represents and the brand and the strength and magnetic pull it has with its brand, where there's obviously there's demand for cell phones, and Apple dominates a certain portion of that demand in the market sector for those that are looking to buy cell phones. But then there's those that would love to have an iPhone but can't afford the price. So maybe they're getting other brands of cell phones, but their desire's there. But yet that number, those that just desire it but can't, they're not factored in to the equation of demand and therefore what Apple is supplying to that demand. And that's, to me, I think of that of just something that where people want it. A lot of people can afford it, particularly. So they're in that demand pool, right?
Yeah.
But those that desire it but can't afford it, they're not in that demand pool. Unless they're something changes where Apple all of a sudden drops their price point down, which isn't going to happen, right? Or those people all of a sudden maybe they have a boost in income and they can afford it, or they've been saving up for it, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and like you said, it's like, okay, the phone market, which is now essentially everyone, that's grown to, pretty much everyone needs a phone, everyone has a phone, so the market is massive. And so to be in business, you have to have a market. There has to be a demand for the most part. And you think about the phone market in your example where it's like, okay, there's a huge demand for it. Android outsells Apple. They have tons of phones everywhere. Everyone has, or the majority actually have Android phones, yet Apple, with its desirability in the brand, it addresses a certain segment of that market. They're not the everyone's phone, while they still their design, their price point, everything about them talks to a certain desirability that's drawing in that segment of the market at a much more profitable rate as well compared to what Android does. And that allows them to then invest back into the product, the experience, all these things. And so the desirability of Apple is through the roof versus perhaps, like Android that isn't quite there.
Yeah. And when we talk about magnetic pull of a brand and talking about Apple, it's like if Apple was to decide to enter the kitchen appliance sector and started making refrigerators.
Yeah.
That magnetic pull of the people that they have, the desirability of their brand, kind of hinges with and is tethers with the audience of that uses their computer products and cell phones, right? It's all kind of an ecosystem. A laptop or a iPhone are all pretty much the same, but so it's the same market sector. Now all of a sudden, how many? If they were to do that, there's going to be tons of people that will go wherever the brand goes,
right?
Because of that relationship that brand has with its audience, right? And that desirability, that and that emotional connection, right, with anything that Apple does. And that to me is again that parallels that just the power that the brand has.
Even something like that, is it so much the desire? Yes, the desirability for the brand in that case of going, okay, I love Apple's phones, I love their computers, and they went into, made an awesome fridge or like an awesome microwave.
Air fryer.
I would be
Apple air fryer, the eye fryer.
But I would be drawn to it because it's Apple. I love the brand, but also there's a desirability to be consistent, my desirability to maintain that relationship with the brand and to be loyal, my desirability to be loyal. And going, okay, no, I'm an Apple person. Man, they made an awesome, even when they're talking about the EV, their electric vehicle they're working on, I think they've paused it now, but even that, I'm like, okay, Apple coming out with a car is probably going to be pretty awesome, but also I'm an Apple person. I could see myself driving an Apple car,
right?
And there's this kind of that, is it because my desire to be consistent in my identity as an Apple person or my desire to be loyal, it kind of starts going into these very gray areas, which is great because that's really, when you, like we always talk about with the brand, it's like, it is a gray area. It's very emotional. It's very subjective.
Well, another brand that actually, we've been talking hypothetical, right? But let's talk about another one of our favorite brands we like to chat about, Disney. And now they're moving into real estate.
Yeah, right. And they started these multiple living communities. I think they're calling it story living. That's their phrase for it. So Disney is building full communities of homes, landscaped, and the overall
cool suburbs.
Yeah, like it's full, grand design and how you live, how you go through the streets, the walking, the trails, all that, and then the houses, of course. And they're releasing that, and they have a couple areas so far where they're going to be located. But the demand, the housing market. Of course there's demand for that, and the rates affect that, but it's also like it's one of the most consistent demands. And now you have this desirability of how would you like to live
in a Disney home?
Yeah. Like, can you imagine what that would be like? How it would be designed, the layout, the landscape,
imagine
the backyard.
If they had like themed interior design, like you could have the haunted mansion on the inside of your home. Because there's a lot of people that do that. I see so many reels on social media of people that are like transform, into Disney themed interior
Tiki
spaces.
room.
Imagine if Disney's actually behind that.
Oh yeah,
and the quality in the build and everything.
Right, and Disney, they are masters at finding that opportunity. Is that even in Disneyland, it's like with the lines that you wait in line to go on the rides, the main attractions, they really realize that the desire of waiting in line is for it to be shorter, of course, right? So it's a matter of patience. It's a matter of people getting bored and uncertainty. So they help that, like we've said before, that they give you time, wait times, and they over exaggerate those times so the wait feels shorter. But they make their lines entertaining and fun and engaging, so that it's not a matter of time anymore because the person in line is now. They're entertained. They've lost track of time, and they're actually just enjoying being in line. So it's not a matter of making the wait shorter. It's making the wait entertaining, which then still solves that desire that the person in line is wanting, right? It makes time go by faster for them. So it's really cool because they address the matter of time not by shortening it, by making it go by faster. So really Disney successfully kind of, repositions the solution, and they really reposition how you're addressing that desire. It's brilliant.
Again, there's lots of opportunities, but sometimes you have to, a brand needs to come along and sometimes reposition. It might provide something that the market is asking for. There might be a desire in the market for some solution, and a product or service comes along to fulfill that solution, but it might have to pivot, and the brand might have to pivot in order to align itself, right, with where the focus of the demand is. And it makes me think back to that story you were telling me about a couple of days ago about Henry Ford.
Right. And so you think about going back to Henry Ford's time, where you had a little, carriages, horses, and people getting around, and that was their main kind of medium for that, the vehicle at the time. And he comes along with a new invention, the automobile, and there's no horses. It's foreign. It's different. People don't quite understand it. And the desire at the time, though, was for faster transportation,
faster travel, getting
faster
from
travel.
point A to B. Yeah.
And getting around, and just that luxury of that. And of course, horses have, loads of other issues that come with them. But
that the only solution at the time in the market space was in more thoroughbred horses, better, whatever.
Yeah.
You get faster horses, but comes the automobile along, right? Gas fueled automobile that no one has ever heard or seen of, and it was there to meet that demand of faster travel, right? But there was a big problem.
They're the audience, if they're instantly thinking, okay, we must need faster horses, more horses, whatever it could be to help get it done, and they're not thinking outside of that, and then Henry Ford comes along, and he's able to go, hey, this is the automobile. The product's not fitting that market because they're demanding something different. Their logical and rational kind of conclusion for the desire was horses, right? And so Henry comes along and he goes, no, this is the horseless carriage, right? So he repositions and frames the product to fit more within that market.
And that changed because then all of a sudden people were starting to take notice of his automobile, because he wasn't framing it as an automobile, he was framing it as a horseless carriage.
Right.
In the context by which the demand of the market was focused on. So it was like kind of having to reposition the brand to align with where the demand was, to then meet that desire that the market
and the same
space
thing,
had.
Same thing Steve Jobs did with the iPod, where he wasn't talking about, okay, this is the iPod, it holds, I think it was like a megabyte at the time, but it was something very small. But he repositioned that and made it 1,000 songs in your pocket. Because what was the desire? The desire was of the audience was more songs. I want to be able to have my songs with me on the go, and not have to have tapes or CDs or whatever it could be, and have to rifle through that, but be able to go, no, this is 1,000
entire library
songs.
of music.
Boom, right there in your pocket. And you see the reframing there, and it's not so much, he's not reframing the demand. They're reframing the product based off of the overarching kind of desire, and then the demand, like we talked about, it starts being attracted to that.
He reframes the script. He rephrases the story his brand is telling. Right, it's the same widget, but by positioning it to the audience through brand and all your touch points in your messaging, by framing it from a different angle. If you were to say it's a wheel or it's a cornerless square, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah. But if someone only thinks in terms of squares, and you say it's a cornerless square, because they don't know what you mean when you say a circle. Yeah. Well, now they understand it's the same thing. So it's reframing it to be and positioning it slightly different. Yeah. To then allow that match of desire and demand.
Right. The positioning, this is the business's opportunity where they can reposition something, pivot it or reframe it, look at the frame of reference, like Scott was saying, of your audience, and positioning the product or your offering to not just fit the demand. That's not the problem. The demand is the logical, rational side of it. But you want to have it fit and really resonate with that desire. Because then that desire, like water, is going to reroute down these little paths and find a different medium. It goes from horses to then goes, oh, this automobile, right? And that water starts trickling more that way,
Right.
and keeps growing until you have a nice stream. And again, the demand, if we go back to, you know, what economists are defining demand as, is that it's affordability. It's someone's already they've already set aside their money, whether it is a refrigerator and they're going, okay, I want to spend $1,500 or $2,500 on a fridge. I'm putting that aside. That's the market I'm looking at. That's the demand. That's the market. But the desirability, they may not know of a different option that could be available to them, or a different brand that's offering a different, you know, approach to that. Like you said, if Apple went in and started making fridges, there's going to be a different approach that's more intuitive to not only maybe the layout of the fridge, but its capabilities. If you were to look at your existing market, zoom out and look at what is the desire that someone is wanting in this, because most likely there are segments in that you can address more directly, and then that's going to increase really that draw.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when a brand when you set a thermostat, let's say the home is 75 degrees. So it's kind of like with your brand setting the thermostat and changing the whatever that is, and then allowing the demand to shift to that.
And really going, okay, how do you, as a brand, as a business, how do you set the thermostat? What do you do? And to me, it's like the main leverage you have is really understanding your audience and focusing more and more on them and being able to resonate more with them. And so if you want to increase the temperature, which is really, it's like that increasing that desirability and getting it to like almost like that boiling point where someone then goes, okay, I can either make this affordable, I can come to a conclusion of purchasing this. But by doing that, by focusing more on your audience, your brand's going to become more accurate in who it's talking to, how you're talking to them, how you're approaching to them, and hitting that desirability for that certain segment. You can't hit the desirability for the entire swath.
And it's almost like you got to be, I think the more you're aware, we talk a lot about brand and your brand and having it be distinctive. Mm-hmm. And that's not just a visual distinction. It's in what you're bringing to the market. Whether it's a service or product, you're bringing something to the market. When your product or service over time can start to almost tell the future of what your customer is wanting or needing. It kind of brings me to mind because we just had the latest Apple iOS drop, right? And not just Apple, because we've already talked about Apple's brand. Let's just take any software product. But when an app updates and it's got some improvements, it brings to me as a consumer solutions to problems that I didn't know I had. Does that make sense?
Right.
Improvements on how I do things. And a lot of them, I never thought, oh, wow, if only I could do this. It's a tiny shortcut. That would be so much better. I'm not aware of it. But the product or the brand is pivoting a little bit and presenting itself with, again, that idea of faster horses, the automobile, horseless carriage, the same type of thing where you're almost reading your audience and finding out how can I better my service? How can I better my product in a way that it brings about a slight revolution to them and solve something that maybe they don't have. You know, when like with people traveling and wanting to go to nice places to stay and having hotels, the desire was to find nice places to stay, and then Airbnb says, well, hey, what if they come along, here's a brand that comes along and says, I got an idea. And it was kind of a solution that we almost were blind to. And then when a brand's able to seize on that.
Yeah, and I like that example with Airbnb because it's like when someone travels, not for business, but for like fun, the default mode was hotels. God forbid like motels, but they like hotels. But the hotel, the issue with it was usually out of where you're wanting to stay. You're in this corporate, very cookie cutter kind of environment where you're in the experience of maybe the city you're visiting, but you're still in like a Hilton, right? You're still within something that's familiar, and that's great, right? That's why Starbucks works, where it's a familiar space, no matter if you're in London or New York or LA. But Airbnb comes along and goes, okay, the desire though, when someone travels, they're wanting that experience of the area they're in. how do you give someone more of that on the where they're staying side of it? How do you give them more than that than staying at a house of a family that actually lives there, right? Or someone, a little residential home that's actually in a neighborhood where you're living like the locals. You can't do that with a hotel. And so the desire wasn't just a place to stay, but Airbnb is able to address the desire for the travel experience, for that of living like the locals. And it's like the same thing when you go somewhere. It's like, you want to do what the locals do. I want to go to the best spots that the locals like. I don't want to go to the tourist traps.
Or even like the latest run of commercials that Airbnb has been dropping where, they'll present like where if you go as a family, your bedtime, the parents' bedtime is kind of like when the kids' bedtime is, right? Because you're in a hotel room, right? Maybe 2 queen beds, right? And that's it. Whereas all of a sudden it transition, hey, with Airbnb, now all of a sudden you've got a 2-story home or a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom home. The kids are back and you've got the living room and you and your wife, they're staying up late. Kids are asleep in the
basement.
That again, that idea reminding the market space of a solution, right? Because there's that desire. The desire is to stay somewhere.
Yeah.
But I would actually like the desire to have a pool that I don't have to worry about someone's bratty kids, making all this ruckus around the poolside. I can be chill because it's just me and my friends, right?
Yep.
Or whatever they want. Again, Airbnb is a solution, whereas a lot of times it's again reminding the consumer of needs, of demands, really, that they didn't even know they had, that the service or product is kind of presenting to them.
Right. To me, it's like, okay, you have big examples of large companies doing huge, innovative things from like Uber to Airbnb to Apple. And to me, it's like, it's not so much these huge innovations. You don't need to make an iPod or or come up with some online company, but it's like the fact that you can address the desire in a different way, even as a small business, that's huge because you have to change your outlook and change the way by not just looking at the demand, but looking at that desire. And just like with Airbnb, there's many sides to the desire. There's the desire to experience the local region, the desire for a better stay if you do have multiple people in your party, that you're not just all staying in the same room or 2 rooms or having to share a pool. But you kind of can start dissecting because those are different segments within the huge market that you have. And so whether you're, selling wine or, selling floral arrangements or something, it's like you have to address the desirability within the market and not just look at the current demand and how it's being addressed by really like those kind of standard modes, whether that's the the horses or the hotels. It's like, no, being able to focus on, okay, how can I address this differently? And it's like what we talked about in our having a narrative in your story, is that this is the story that's being told across the market, but how can you go about it and be distinct and have your own narrative of how you're actually going about that?
Right. And that's what I love too, is that people are always looking at, if most businesses or brands are looking at their constituents, their audience, right, as their customers, those that currently engage with them, mostly, and those that are like them.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily looking or considering the fact that their audience under desirability with the brand is much bigger and broader. And there's reasons for whatever that, and it could just be not having the need. There's brands that like are out there that are great, but if I needed some work coveralls, I'll probably go get Carhartts, right?
Yeah.
Big brand, everyone loves them. I have no need to engage with the brand. I'm not going to go out and engage with the brand when I don't have a use for it.
Right.
But if the time comes, if I need to find, and I find myself going, hey, I'm going to build a home and I'm going to need some hey, and again, all of a sudden now I have demand.
Yeah.
Right? The demand is now finally matching with the desire that's been there a long time.
It's funny because it's almost like that desire builds up, and then when the rational situation kind of agrees with it, or it makes it reasonable for you to have to shop or have that demand, then it clicks. It clicks into place.
So again, it's that idea of just as a brand, make sure you're not short-sighted. You're only thinking about the here and now and to the exact audience that's in the room.
Yeah.
Like you want to project your message with the hope that you're going to be speaking to those outside of the building, outside the community, right? and that would incorporate those that may not turn a sale right now, but that's okay because that's the business side of things, right?
Yeah. And a good example that people are probably familiar with is like even just the rise of Tesla, where Tesla came into a market that was, electric vehicles that was at the time only associated with like Prius, which was all eco-friendly, save the planet, and you drive electric vehicle if you want to save the planet. Tesla comes along and repositions it, and this is when they only have either like the Roadster, which is I think starts at 200,000 maybe, and the Model S, the sedan, which is maybe 80,000 to start. And so they have a high price electric vehicle that isn't focused, even their messaging, it wasn't focused on, green living and saving the planet. It was all focused on design and sleek and sexy. So like you're saying, the desirability of the product design of doing something that, it's nice looking and it's well designed. And it happens to be electric. That like you're saying, they were speaking to people outside of that. And, being proactive in the sense of going, if we start talking to these people and making them familiar with the Tesla brand and the name, then over time, as you predict the market growing for electric vehicles, who are they going to choose, right? And like you said, they were talking to people who weren't in the market at the time. They weren't demanding electric vehicles at the time. They were like, why would I drive that? It makes no sense. But right. Tesla and Elon having the proactive vision of looking out and skating where the puck's going and going, okay, we need to start marketing to typical drivers who are looking at gas vehicles and doing that, and they want nice looking, sexy design. And then you look at how this aligns with their pricing strategy is that they started building up all of that compounding kind of brand equity of awareness and just the appeal. And then they roll out a lower priced Model 3, Model Y, and they start addressing these existing demands of a crossover or a small, 4-door. And then it just explodes from there because they built up all that desire. And then they slid in with the price point on the existing demand of those type of vehicles.
It's almost like you've got like you said, you have two spheres. You got, I would probably love an EV car, but there's certain things holding me back right now. But if someone, let's say an EV car manufacturer comes along and says, our cars take charge in half the time.
Yeah, then you're like,
then all of a sudden now you're going to be looping in some people that had the desire to get an EV, but one of the downsides that to them for a problem was the length of charge time, and you have to really, from what I hear from people that drive EV cars, you have to be very kind of more looking at your daily schedule going, okay, where am I going? When do I charge? What do I do while I charge? Because it might take some time to charge and be efficient with your day. And that's nothing that really people a lot to talk about. And so, but if all of a sudden an EV car all of a sudden comes along that solves that the demand is not aware of, right?
Yeah.
There's the demand for EV cars and there's a lot of incentives. But now all of a sudden you're addressing a desire. Now you're looping in some of the crowd that were desire and not in demand sphere. And now they move in because now your product service come along and helped resolve that.
Yeah. And it's almost like that rationalization where they may have a desire for, everyone desires to save money on gas, especially in California. Like, that'd be nice to pay less. And EV makes sense that rationalizes that. But the charging times, I don't have to worry about that. They can't rationalize that. But if someone, like you said, if they come along and nail that right on the head, then it's like, oh, game over. Yeah. That's rationalized. Okay, move on.
Or there's charging stations like it, in
everywhere.
2 years, how many more charging stations do you think there's going to be around? Like, now all of a sudden it makes it again, it shifts the market. Right. And we talk about market shifts happen all the time. Right. And so now all of a sudden you have a market shift where more and more people are going to consider it because the market itself has introduced or brought solutions. Right. The market can find its own solutions, but how do brands pivot through that? And again, managing between or balancing between desire and demand.
Yeah. With the electric vehicles, one of the greatest things that we've seen is the behavioral change of people. Not only how they view electric vehicles, thanks to brands like Tesla and some of these other ones are coming out with great product design, but the actual behavior of drivers and them going, okay, this new medium, this new mode, just like with horses versus, the car, or hotels versus Airbnb. It's like they're seeing EVs as a solution for this. And so the behavior is changing, they're adjusting to it. And so then therefore the market is shifting. Yeah. And that's why you see all these other brands having to adapt to that as well. So as behaviors change, that desirability is moving that, right? The desirability moves the behavior, which then affects the markets.
Yeah.
So recapping kind of what we're talking about is just, as a business, looking at these large movements we've seen in markets and brands, and being able to go, okay, why does it work for these companies, for these massive companies, and for my business, how can I apply some of this? And looking at going the overarching desire within your market and how that's being met by these different solutions for those demands. And going, how can you address that desire differently? How can you look at it differently, but also approach it differently and provide a different solution that's going to maybe pull in some different demand. And that's not only going to set you apart, but also, again, be that magnet of your brand that really draws that audience in.
Yeah. And then it allows you, and gives your brand the freedom to start doing new things and maybe merging into new market sectors, because you've got that magnetic pull that comes from the power of brand. So on that note, I think we will wrap it up for our 30th episode. For those of you that still continue to check in with us, we appreciate your time, and I think we should go seek out another round here, Reilly. Huh?
Sounds good.
Okay. Till next time. Cheers.